Okay, we'll get started. Thanks for joining us today. This is a webinar on new features, just covering some of the highlights of the new features in Insight version 10.1. And I'm going to try to get to a little sneak peek of 10.2, which is going to be released at the end of April. So Insight 10.1, sorry, there is a 10.1.2 hot fix out just recently. That's been available actually since the end of January. It has around 70 enhancements and 117 resolved issues. The highlights I'm going to talk about today are a new solution for return material authorization processing, the ability to switch stock items from make to buy and vice versa, alternate routing operations, process group max container item calculations by a formula, and enhanced material management on rejecting. So we, as of version 10.1, we do have a complete kind of closed loop return material authorization capability. It does require the use of the inventory module as well as shop floor assistant. This is part of the core solution. So if you have sales orders, you have access to this. Although to be able to enable the full or utilize the full functionality, you do need to have the inventory module and at least one shop floor assistant license available. So this provides new functionality around the sales orders, bill of material processing, and inventory. As I said, it allows you to record reason codes for returns. It has the ability to auto-assign RMA numbers to return items, receive those items back to inventory, disposition those items to one of several dispositions, and then use those RMA order lines to track, process, and repair or return items back to the customer as needed. There is a full, much more detailed presentation available for this, and so you can certainly request that through customer support. We'll be glad to share that with you. And I believe it was attached to the version 10.1 announcement email as well. So the way this works is we use sales orders, sales order lines. There's a new line type definition similar to replacement parts that's called RMA. And it uses the replacement parts functionality to allow you to select either a complete product that was shipped to a customer previously or a component within that bill of material as an RMA item, record a reason code, and then allow the customer to ship that item back to you, and it gives you records to receive against so that you can actually receive that previously shipped item back into your physical inventory. So you would typically set up an RMA order type and an RMA line type. You would put in an RMA order for that customer, select the original order line via the parts tab in sales order lines. The RMA IDs are assigned automatically, and you would typically have a sort of a parallel, like an RMA order type workflow. So that order would go from enter to waiting for the product to be shipped back, and then once the product is received at the dock, there is an SFA frame for receiving those items, so you can look up by RMA number or by customer code, and you'll get a list of available unreceived RMAs. You receive those, it will assign those to a location, or you select an inventory location, and then there's a separate frame for inspection and disposition. There are 4 possible dispositions for an RMA. If I choose repair, the system will take that order line, advance its status, and auto-generate what we call a repair bill of material. And I'll explain a little more about that in a second. If I choose replace, the system will auto-generate a replacement bill of material. If I choose scrap, because maybe the customer sent it back and it's no good, and I'm going to choose to start a separate replacement order line, or they sent it back because they didn't need it anymore, but when I received it, it was no good. So that will actually take the received item and generate an inventory scrap transaction. Or I can simply return the item to inventory, and that will prompt me for a location if I'm moving it from the original receipt location, and transfer that item into inventory, back to the selected inventory location. And we'll treat that as an anonymous inventory item. So even if it's a make-to-order item and I choose to keep it in inventory, it will behave as anonymous inventory, and that will allow me to use that item on a future sales order. So if it's a pure, they just ordered too many and they sent it back and you can reuse it, the system will let you do that. For a repair bill of material and replacement bill of material, that references the selected items in the replacement parts selection. If I choose replace, then I will get the full bill of material for the replacement item as if I was generating a new sales order line or a new replacement part. If I choose repair, I will get a simple two-level bill of material that will have the selected item from replacement parts and that same item number as a component, but it will actually auto-allocate that returned item to that level in the bill of material. So the idea is to give you a vehicle to generate a work order for repairing and tracking that repair through the plant, but giving you also then an order item record that you can put onto a shipment so that you can repair the item and ship it back to the customer. So one of the things you will need to account for is appropriate routing alternate setup or routing reassigns, or a manual routing selection in the engineering browser to put in appropriate repair routing on that top level item in that replacement part bill of material, as it may just go to a repair department and have either a simple or a more complex routing. But it gives you an order item structure and pulls from that received item, so that the idea is the item I received is the item I'm going to repair. So it's not going to generate new make-to-order demand to make a new one. It's just giving you an order item to track through the shop so that you can repair the original. As I said, we do have a more detailed PowerPoint that goes through status workbench considerations and goes through more detailed examples. The next item is make-buy for purchase to stock and make to stock items. So in a previous version, I think it was in 9 something, we opened up the possibility for make to order items to be switched to purchase to order, and now we've extended that capability to stock items. So in order to enable this functionality, if you have advanced material planning, so calculate suggestions for manufacturing stock control, purchase stock control, if I have a make to stock item, in order to make it purchased, all I need to do is add data to the purchasing tab on the item master. If I have a purchase to stock item, I need to add data to the manufacturing tab, add any components required to make that item, and then add a supply plant definition in the item stocking tab. So whatever is selected on in the main header of the item, if it's a make to stock or purchase to stock by default, that will be its normal behavior. But by adding that additional data to those item master records, I have the ability to make a planning-based decision case by case that I can switch from one to the other. So for example, in purchase stock control, if the system calculates a suggestion or I add a manual suggestion, if I've added one or more supply plants to the item stocking data for a purchase part, that will be available as if it were an alternate vendor. And if I choose a supply plant instead of a vendor for that suggestion and then click the Generate Purchase Order button, what I will get is a replenishment order instead of a purchase order. And the bomb will be exploded. It'll work just like a make-to-stock item that's being replenished then, which is why you need components typically on that, on that purchased item. The same is true for a make item, kind of the inverse. If I have purchasing data and item vendor data on the make item, in the suggestion drop-down, I will have a selection of supply plants and vendors. So if I choose a vendor and click the create replenishment order button, I will actually get a purchase order instead. So if you have items that you typically buy but sometimes make, or vice versa, or you have you have the ability to outsource some production during peak demand times, you have this ability during planning now for all make and buy item types to be able to selectively make or buy depending on what the situation demands. So it's pretty easy to use. The only thing you need to do to enable it is add the additional data to the item masters. The next enhancement in 10.1 is alternate routing operations. So especially if you're using enable work order operations, this is maybe relevant to you, but what it allows you to do is predefine an alternate one or more alternate operations with a checkpoint. It's cut off in the screen here, but you would also choose an alternate checkpoint for a given operation, and wherever any routing that this operation is used in will have these other operations available as alternates. In version 10.1, you can switch those using an on-demand action, either in the work order inquiry form or in a checkpoint. So if I choose a work order in a work list at my primary operation, there's an action for process operation alternates. You will get a prompt when you run that action for with a list of available alternates. You can choose that alternate and the operation will be switched in the work order. In version 10.2, you actually can enable a flag on the checkpoint that will automatically switch to the alternate if simply by scanning at the alternate checkpoint. So if I have two CNC machines set up as different work centers and different operations, but they can both do a lot of the same parts. As of 10.2, I can even though my routing has machine A in the routing, I can just walk that part to machine B, scan at that checkpoint, and the operation will automatically be switched. And again, to set that up, there's some checkpoint configuration settings and or one setting, and the alternate operation definition on the operations form, which is here. It's just a new tab on the operations form. So the primary benefit is if you have redundant work centers and you want a little more on demand, you want to let the shop floor decide when to use an alternate. You can set that up in advance. You can still constrain it because you control which operations are alternates of each other, but it makes it quite a bit easier for the factory, for the operators to choose on the fly which machine to use, but still have scanning and tracking capability. So work order scan history and operation completions will get logged based on the checkpoint that was actually used. The next highlight is process group max container items. This allows us, historically on a dynamic process group that uses dynamic containers, we have a max container item setting that says, okay, I can't put more than 100 items or things on this, on a container in this process group. However, sometimes, depending on the business process and manufacturing operation being used, if I have a cart or I have a stack, actually those values really can vary, for example, based on thickness of a part. So if I might can fit 100, 1-inch parts on a stack, but I could do 200 half-inch parts. And the same process group, I'd like to maximize, that capability or minimize the number of pallets on a conveyor or whatever. So in version 10.1, there's a new tab on the process group definition called item families, and there's the reciprocal tab on item families called process groups, which allows you to select any number of item families and define what we call a fill factor formula. That formula calculates a factor that is used when we create work orders. So think of it as a multiplier. And so in my example here, if my, Z dimension, my thickness, part thickness is less than 15 millimeters, then my factor is 0.5. The value of this part gets multiplied times a half. If it's between 15 and 25, it's 3/4, and if it's 25 to 50, it's 1.5. Otherwise, it just counts as a 1. And so this multiplier will be automatically applied when we're determining the number of parts to put into a container when we generate work orders. So the max container items really sort of becomes a capacity reference value. And for items that may go into that process group, I can have a variable factor that's used to determine, again, if it's 1/2 inch, I can fit 200. If it's 2 inches, I can only fit 50. And if it's 1 inch, I can fit 100. Same thing could apply for slots. If a cart slot can hold up to 5 parts of a given thickness, or 10 if they're thinner, or even area-based calculations. If you've got a long, skinny part that you can put side by side on a pallet, you can put twice as many as if the part is wide. So this factor value is calculated and saved during BOM processing on the order item instance. There is a setting that has to be enabled somewhere. I don't remember if I have it in here. Yeah, there's a setting under System Configuration, Product and Process Management Instance Processing called Enable Process Group Fill Factor, and if you turn that on, any formulas that exist on those item families will be executed, and the factor value will be saved and referenced during work order creation. So this may or may not apply to everybody, but it does create some increased flexibility, maybe reduce some maintenance if you've got, in the past, if you wanted to do this, you either had to have multiple parallel process groups and a lot of process group filtering to get the right thing into the right process group with the right max value, or you had to do some kind of work order creation customization. So hopefully this will simplify life if you've got that kind of scenario. The next item is some improvements on managing material issues and demand on rejects. So we've added a control to the reason type definition. If you have a reason type that creates a container, if you choose none, this doesn't apply. But if you do rejected or child items, you will have an additional radio button selection here for material disposition, which allows you to predetermine what will happen to materials that have already been issued to the original work order up to that point. So you have 4 options: keep, reuse, scrap, or prompt. And the way they work is, if I choose keep, then any existing issues, so if I'm back flushing, say, halfway through the routing, and at the 1/2+1 mark, I have to do a remake. The keep option will keep the existing issue, material issues, back flushes or manual issues on the original work order, and additional material will be issued on the reject. So when the reject starts over and comes back through the back flush point, it'll back flush again, which means you'll consume additional material, which is more representative of what's really happening. If you choose reuse, the existing issues will be moved not for the entire work order, but for the rejected quantity. The related issue quantities will be adjusted and moved over to the original work order, which means that new material will not be issued. The assumption is, let's say I have a panel or a door and I'm sending it back, but I can reuse the core material, or I can reuse the solid wood. And I'm just going to repair it, but I want to use a new container to track the repair. In that case, I would not issue additional material. I'm going to reuse what was issued, but do something to it. If I choose scrap, then for the rejected quantity, the existing issues will be scrapped. There will be an inventory scrap transaction created. And again, demand will be opened up again for the already issued material. So you would see a bump in your demand calculations in purchase stock control and manufacturing stock control and so on. And if you choose prompt, then on the shop floor assistant reject frame, the user will get a dialog that will show them the issues that have occurred under each selected order item that's being rejected, and that user will have to choose one of the other 3 options for each issued material. That's kind of like full manual control. Maybe if you're at, possibly even within the context of the RMA, if they reject a work order and want to pick and choose what parts they're going to keep and what parts need to be replaced, you can have very granular control over what's what's going to be reused and what's not. Or if you're rejecting assemblies to a repair area, and that repair person needs to decide exactly what to replace and what to keep, that kind of scenario. So hopefully that is a valuable refinement to the whole how we handle issued materials when we have a reject. A few other things that are worth mentioning. I mean, there's, like I said, there's around 70 enhancements overall, and so I'm trying to hit sort of the biggest or most important. We do have added the ability to select subproducts if you use a product structure from different catalogs. So the way we do that is we can define an item as a what we call an independent subproduct. And that means it then can be added manually to a product structure during order entry across catalog versions. So we used to only allow subproduct structure within one catalog version. Now we can actually pull in subproducts from another catalog version into the same sales order. We've added reference criteria property references for commission price calculations to order line and order line accrual price rules, so that if your commissions are based on either a specific price rule position or a subtotal, you can have more precise references when you're calculating commissions off of, for example, if you calculate off of list or off of discount or somewhere in between, you can target a specific price rule on an order line or specific accrual to determine a commission value. Another improvement in flexibility in production scheduling and work order creation is using process group offset values to determine container operation dates. So there's a setting in system configuration, and think of it as merging the old process group offset and the new enable work order operations. So if you enable work order operations because you want to track detailed history on a work order of what got completed, operation by operation, but you don't want to use operation schedule offsets to determine lead times. Now you can really kind of do it both ways. You can instantiate the operations on the work order, but have a generic process group based offset. In that case, any operations in that process group or for work orders and within that process group will have the same start and due dates. So all operations will essentially be set up in parallel to each other using the start and due calculated from the process group offset. So we won't try to sequence them and stagger them. If you use process group, it's a fixed lead time for work orders in that process group, and all the operations will start and end on the same day, or at the same start and due date as the process group. But it does give you the ability to enable work order operations, but use sort of the old method for schedule offset calculations. We've also enhanced the shop floor scanning functionality to make it a little bit easier to customize if necessary. And the way we have done that is by taking our validate container scan and process container scan business logic and push that into checkpoint procedures. So now when I go into a checkpoint tab, I have the ability to override on a case-by-case basis at a checkpoint level and actually at a checkpoint tab level, or SFA frame level. I can override the validate and process container stand procedures. So if you've got maybe a custom barcode that you use and you simply want to look that up somewhere, but then find the right ORI ID and pass it back to our standard validate, or if you've got some really different logic you want to do in processing scans, you can get in there and so you're not hacking our standard procedure. You would develop an override procedure and then select that procedure within the checkpoint setup. So we have a lot of customers who, for one reason or another, need to not just have a custom scan frame, but they want to use maybe most or all or some of our standard validate, but they need to tweak it a little bit. So this makes it a lot easier and more visible, and you're not going in and reverse engineering everything. You can just make your own adjustments. And it's located at the checkpoint tab level so that it's also fairly isolated in case you want normal scanning logic at some places, but special scanning at others. A couple other more, sort of technical things. We have a new Insight client license available for Insight order entry. So we have tiered licensing with Insight clients. You have the full version, the shop floor assistant, and the inquiry. Now we've added a fourth level for order entry. So if you've got, you need to add 5 order entry users, but they really purely just do order entry and they don't need access to a full client, then it can help on the pricing side. It's a little bit pricing advantage for a more focused client license. We've extended our web service request in response action type to support certificate-based authentication. So if you're going out to a third-party website with that action type, you can now provide certificate authentication in that transaction. And we've added a system function for currency conversion and purchase price rule formulas. I don't know if that's something that is heavily used in Europe when you're dealing with a lot of different currencies. I don't know if it's as common here in the Americas, but that is a function that can be called in a price rule formula that will handle conversion between purchasing currency and the base currency and so on. A couple things on technical changes, just a minor cosmetic thing. The themes, we have the Valentine's Day and the Halloween and the other theme items here. The Insight Classic theme has been discontinued, and it's been replaced with our new standard Insight theme. The other ones, all your favorites are still there, but just the Insight. The blue one is gone, and it's been replaced with the orange and gray, that's all. Insight 10.1, actually this latest hotfix 10.1.2 is compatible with the new 20 Construct 12. For those of you that may not have seen the announcement, that is the 2020 branded engineering configurator. There is a new primary key index added to a table in the configurator database. So that's it for 10.1. I'll jump right into the 10.2, just the top 5 highlights here. Let me start with catalog version, product version. And so we are kind of fast tracking quite a few enhancements in 2016. We had built kind of a big backlog of smaller, in most cases, smaller type development projects that were requested by customers or popular requests. So we've taken sort of a pause in our regular release cycle for 2016, and we're doing essentially all of the new features we would typically do in version 11, we're putting into service packs of 10.2. The most, what we consider sort of the highest or the most priority or the most popular requests are being addressed first, and the lower priority, smaller requests are being done in later service packs. So at least through version 10.4, you'll see a significant number of enhancements. Most of them are small, smaller in scope, but there will be a lot of new features coming throughout this year. That could continue to 10.5 and possibly 10.6, but I would expect after 10.4, that volume of new features is going to drop off pretty drastically, and then next year we'll get into another get back into our annual major release cycle. And we are doing quarterly releases, so at the end of April, end of July, and then end of September. We'll be having our regular schedule, but we're taking our new development capacity and putting that into service packs. So in 10.2, we have made a pretty significant change to the ability to how you can manage product versions within a catalog version. As of 10.2, we will now allow multiple product versions in one catalog version, although we will only support one active version at a given time. So this will not use effectivity dates at the catalog level, and that is actually for many reasons. One of which, or the most important of which, is that if we'd have switched from sort of a data-driven model to a date-based model, that would have been very, very disruptive to the existing functionality and would have created kind of a high potential for defects. It would have been essentially risky and destabilizing to order entry in particular. So we took this, again, this is sort of a popular request, but it's because of the data model has been a challenge in the past and was just sort of risk prohibitive. But we found a different way to address it that gives us 90% of the benefit with 10% of the risk. And that is to introduce this catalog version, product version active flag. So what that allows us to do is open up the database constraint to allow more than one version of a product in the same catalog, but only have one active at the current time without date sensitivity. What that means for old orders or previous sales orders that reference the old version is they can still do that. So if I have an order that's been sitting there for 6 months and I publish a new or add a new version to the catalog of a given product, make it active, deactivate the old one, when I go to edit that old order, I will get a warning that says, hey, you have an inactive product version in this order. Do you want to keep it in there because you had a contract with somebody that you're still going to honor, or do you want order entry to automatically update to the latest version of that product and revalidate that product version against its current features and options definition and pricing and so on. So it is intelligent within sales orders. We are also going to be adding in 10.3 some additional mass update features. So for example, the ability to go into sales order line inquiry and find all order lines that have an inactive version on them currently. So that you can, if you make a change to a catalog version because let's say there was an error in the product version, you had an option in there you weren't supposed to, you can quickly address that in the catalog version for all new orders, switch the effective, make the old one inactive, and then also quickly go find all the orders that had that mistake and update them. So think of it in terms of a flag on the sales order line inquiry that lets you find all those order lines, and then an action that will go and update all those order lines on all existing orders or selected order lines on selected orders to the current product version. So we're just trying to help, again, just make life easier with product data and changes and those things that happen every day where somebody made a mistake or we changed our mind or we want to quickly get a new product or a new option, new style or color out to market, but we don't want to publish an entire new catalog version. So that is the first phase of that functionality is in 10.2, and additional sort of user-friendly tools will come in 10.3. The next item is some improvements in our inventory availability sort of visibility by production order. We've added a new system action to production orders called allocate inventory for selected production orders. In order to really give an accurate picture of if there's enough material available for this production order, the only really way to accurately do that is to allocate. If I don't allocate and reserve the inventory, then if I look at production order A and then production order B gets advanced into production while I wasn't looking, that may steal inventory from production order A that I thought I had available. So if we don't allocate, then we can't guarantee that what the information we're showing is accurate. So we've added an action that for all allocatable items in a production order for the resource, the raw material resources, it will generate order allocations for all items, allocatable items in that production order. It will give you an error message if there are any items in that list that there isn't enough on-hand inventory to cover. So you can select 5, production orders and run the action, and it will let you know, hey, this production order has a problem, and it gives you the production order ID, here in the list. Once the material has been allocated, you will see that in the resource summary of the production order. It'll show you there's a new field, required quantity allocated. If something was manually allocated and was under allocated, it will highlight that in yellow. So the goal here again is to give you a better, kind of a hard and fast picture, and you can run that action through status change as well, so it happens every time you advance the status of a production order during the planning process, but it's the ability to kind of do hard reservations for the material on a production order basis. As a side note, we've also enhanced the detail available within the resource summary in the production orders form. If I select a resource item row in the resource summary tab, I will see a detail pane here at the bottom that will show all of the detailed demand source for that material. So I've got these, demand for X number of this drawer slide, and this will show me which order line instances are generating that demand. So if I don't have enough inventory for a given item for this production order, maybe I have, half of what I need, I can, within one screen, go in and see what orders might be affected or which orders I could potentially move off of this production order and do at a later date, and so that I can get, what I can into production based on what material I have. So the goal here is just trying to make that production order form a little bit more helpful in managing the exceptions related to inventory. The next item is an enhancement to master scheduling. There is a new button here in master scheduling. Looks like a little Gantt chart, and it gives you the ability to edit operation dates on either before work order creation or after work order creation. So when I go in and I select, this date that is way over capacity, I can select one or more order items in the list, push that button, and I'll get a dialog that gives me a list of the operations and their calculated start and due dates, and the ability to manually override. So if I want to move one or more operations in that calendar without changing the production order, I want to start something earlier or start something later, I have the ability to do that. Even for firmed production orders. So if work orders have been created, I will actually get, instead of a list of the order item operations, I will get the operations grouped by container ID, and I can still go in as long as those operations have not been started. I can go in and move operations even at a work order level. So manual interference in your production start and scheduling dates. The next item, back to production orders, is we've also added the generic ability to do a mass replacement of material by production order. So let's go back to that. I tried to allocate. I didn't have enough material, but I actually have another item that I could substitute, and either different sheet good size or different, in this example, an edge banding. I could, even though it's a birch edge band, I could actually use maple because I'm going to finish it the same and it will look the same. So I can select an item in my resource summary, and there's a new button for substituting a resource item. It will give me the current item. I have actually a lookup button here that will bring up the item inquiry and let me find a replacement item. And if necessary, let's say, this might be an example of a sheet good. If I have a 4x8 and a 5x10, and I normally use the 4x8 for this part, but I can use the 5x10, I can have a quantity ratio so that when I do the replacement, it will actually do the math and give me a different demand quantity that's appropriate for the replacement material. And it could be less or more, a higher or lower ratio. And the system, once you process, click OK on that action, the system will actually find all the order items, all the bills of material, and update those instances with the replaced material so that backflushing will still work and everything. Again, this is at the production order prior to production order firming. So those bills can be edited automatically in the background. It'll tell you how many substitutions occurred. And if you go into engineering browser, you will see a different bill of material for the affected instances. And then it immediately updates the resource summary here as well. Our plans are in the future that we're going to further enhance this functionality to allow you to predefine a list of substitute materials on an item-by-item basis, so that currently in this first iteration, it was sort of get it out there quickly. I could replace this birch edge band with a hinge, and the system's not going to tell me not to do that. In 10.3, our plan is to, on the item level, define a constrained list of valid replacements so that this drop will become more of a drop-down that will show you only valid replacements as defined by the item. So again, it's just a way to deal with the day-to-day, real-life issues of running out of material and what do I do, when I have to get this out. The last item is that I wanted to cover for 10.2 today is the in-response system check action tree. So one of the other things we're trying to do is make Insight easier to administrate. So this feature set will continue to grow over time. But we've put in a system action tree that you can run on a schedule or on demand that basically does some analysis of the current sort of activity on in response. So there's an action type check where you can define in parameters of the actions, you can define what thresholds you want to sort of determine by, or you want to be your fail-safes by action type and also by action processing time. So for a given action type, you can say, I don't want more than 100 of this action in queue at any one time. Or for this other action type, I don't want this, as soon as this action starts to average more than 10 seconds of run, I want to be notified. Okay, so these queries will go into the in-response queues and the history, analyze the results against the thresholds that you set, and then send an email with the summary to the appropriate admin people. So you can set that up to run hourly or daily or however often, or you can run it just as an on-demand query, and it will send a summary email of the results to the designated people in the email action. This is sort of an early step into, eventually we're working toward a kind of a health monitoring dashboard kind of form that will be an on-demand screen, inquiry type screen that will let you look at lots of different information in that from a performance point of view, things like tables that are growing too much, indexes that need to be rerun, kind of more of an advanced warning kind of monitoring behavior just from a performance standpoint. So that is all that I had planned for to present today. And as usual, certainly feel free to contact support if you want a deeper dive into any of these features. I'm available, to give more detailed demonstrations, and certainly, Pro Services is available as well. So we're more than happy to give more information. This is just a kind of an intro level presentation, and we'll continue to do this throughout this year as we do new releases. Thanks a lot for taking the time to spend with me today, and hope to talk to you soon.